Hello, everyone. This is a author interview creative chat. My name is Michele Tracy Berger. I am a scholar, a creative writer, and a creativity coach. So happy to be with you today. And I am super excited about introducing everyone to my dear friend and mentor, Marjorie Hudson. So I'm just going to share a few. There's a lot I could say about her. She has a very long bio, but I'm just going to keep it relatively short. Marjorie Hudson is a writer, a beloved teacher, and community organizer. She writes fiction and nonfiction. She's the author of the short story collection Accidental Birds of the Carolinas and the memoir Searching for Virginia Dare. She moved from DC to North Carolina more than 30 years ago and fell in love with many aspects of Southern history. Her work more recently is focused on the lesser known parts of Southern history and expresses a love of its people, its complexities, its transcendent places. Her debut novel, Indigo Field from Regal House Publishing, has just been released, and it digs deep into the hidden history of an abandoned field, as well as the deepest secrets of its Black, white, and Indigenous neighbors. She's won many distinguished literary awards, too many to name here, and she's not only been a mentor to me and many others on the path of writing, but I'm also honored to know her as a dear, dear friend. And I've asked her today to kind of hang out with us and talk about her book and writing practices. Welcome, Marjorie.
Thank you. It's so good to be here with you, Michele.
Well, I know you've been talking about your book, you've been on book tour, and I'm wondering if we could just start out a little bit about, telling us about how you came to the work, what compelled you about wanting to write about these characters, what compelled you to kind of want to write about also this history or aspects of history that you cover in the book.
Yeah, I have to say that the South and its history and its environment and people are my muse. And that's a very mysterious thing. It's just what grabs you. I also am inspired by what bothers me. And so those two things happen at once for me as a newcomer to the South after about 5 years being steeped in Southernness. I had learned enough about my, my world to know that there were still things that people didn't talk about, except in hushed tones. And there were also things that people were talking about to each other, but not crossing race and culture lines to talk, except if you were very lucky. So I learned that what Black people and white people know about history are two different things. I learned that Native American presence in my part of the South and North and South Carolina was not just the arrowheads left behind centuries ago that we find in our garden. It was living Indigenous people who were part of my community. And I also noticed the changes that were happening culturally from small farms to large retirement villages. And my life was at the cusp of all these things. And you know how it is when you travel to a new place, Paris, perhaps. You notice things and you have to put it together in your mind to create the world that you live in with your own interpretations. And I could see clearly with this very strange I had this kind of strange vision that because of my community work, I was seeing and understanding a very complex world where most of the people, in our culture, keep their worlds kind of small and keep them kind of unconnected to other worlds. In other words, you might have a culture that's mostly white people, or it might be mostly church people, or it might be, so there are these sort of dominant themes in every person's personal culture. And I saw that as somebody selling at a farmer's market and doing community organizing work and mentoring at-risk children and belonging to a historically integrated church in the South and writing about history. I was seeing all these different worlds and intersecting with them. And there was something I wanted to say about that. And it had to do with it being beautiful, complex, secret ridden, and also full of hidden conflict, right? A conflict that we tamp down. So I wanted to also say something about, I was talking to Lolita Tatamy when I was in the midst of revision years ago, and I was very passionate about the book. And I said, and Lolita is a well-known Oprah writer, writes Black and Indigenous history in her own family. And I said, I want to write about white ignorance and how, white people just don't understand. And of course, I was talking about myself, but I was beginning to understand, and I wanted to understand more. And of course, when we write, we learn things we didn't even know we knew. So the first character came to me as a retired man, a stranger running down my road, an older man, and he turned and looked at me and had this look of devastation on his face. And I thought, I don't know where that came from. I want to find out. I'm going to write about that man. So he was the first character specific who came to me to write about. And he's, of course, the Colonel Randolph Jefferson Lee, retired Army who lives in a retirement village and kind of gets things started. Now, I have a lot to say about this, Michelle, so cut me off.
Well, I will. I love that that sense of, we begin with the things that bother. We are moved by the things that bother us, and that can open up some places that characters then come in. And so there's Rand, and then there's what's so interesting too is like just the alliteration, now that I'm saying it out loud, is Miss Reba, right? And so Rand is older white guy, former military, lives in this retirement community, has a particular view about how life is supposed to go for him and his wife. And then there's also Miss Reba, who is has lived in this community where the development is, right? So she's lived for a very long time, and she's African American.
And she looks at it askance, it's not what she's used to, and it's not what she likes. And she thinks, she sees this skinny white man running down the road with shorts and thinks he ought to have more dignity than to run around with his, legs sticking out like that. And so these cultures, and also there's a difference of class. Rand has quite a lot of privilege, and Miss Reba is hanging on. She's also absolutely stricken down by grief in her life. She keeps a list in the back of her Bible of crimes by white people against her family. And of course, it's interesting that I was thinking about this a lot 30 years ago. And since that time, of course, we're seeing research into facts emerging about lynchings in Jim Crow South. Things that were just whispered to me in my community have now been documented, and we have created rituals to honor the families and the victims of lynching and give them, proper respect as far as possible. And this is an extraordinary phenomenon. There's a big shift in the South that I'm loving seeing, along with the shift of taking away the Confederate memorials, which are a form of skewing history. It's like a story that's told with bad intent, that really doesn't tell the truth. And so the various truths are coming out, and that was my hope and my dream, and I'm trying to do it in my novel, and it's happening around me. I feel like, well, no, I didn't cause that to happen, but it's neat that it's happening kind of at the same time.
It's almost like the culture, and had lived in North Carolina for only 20 years, and but the culture, the shift of whose stories matter, how do we tell those stories, I think
Mhm.
in many ways caught up to some of your interests. And the other thing that, um, when I think about both of these characters, they're both outsiders in different ways. So,
Right.
Reba has, because she has indigenous blood, and people don't quite understand her. She doesn't conform to certain ideas
Mhm.
about um, respectability, we might say, or she walks her own path, and she's a spiritual person, but she's part of the church. And then, Rand is also doesn't feel like he belongs in some ways because of some of his past, and also how he is experiencing the current community. And I feel like you do that so well to um, through those points of view, showing their levels of outsiderness as well as their commonality that they don't, often see, right?
Yes, right. They don't know their commonality, but we know. As readers, we learn about the things they may have had in common and not acknowledged to strangers. Um, but yeah, I knew I had to put them in conflict. So one day the colonel is running down the road, not paying attention, looking at his cell phone, talking to his daughter, and he tries to cross the road on a rainy day, and Miss Reba sees him coming, and she has to slam on brakes, and he bounces off of her car, and she thinks she may have killed a white man in broad daylight right in the middle of the highway in front of the gas station. And but no, he rises, he drags himself up and gets his cell phone and puts his hands up, kind of like he might be under arrest, and says sorry and limps away. So when Miss Reba gets home, she sees a dent the size of a white man's thigh in her front fender, and she sees that the car is all rust. How could a big old boater of a car get such a big dent like that? Um, and she all the rage that she's been feeling starts to rise, and she's had so many heartbreaks and so much grief with the recent murder of her niece. She decides that here's one white man who will pay for the damage he has done, and she decides he owes her $90. She doesn't know where he lives, and she doesn't know his name, but she decides to track him down, and that's how their worlds begin to connect.
And there's so many different layers of the community that she's a part of, communities that he's a part of, and how they, through the novel, um, begin to intersect, understand each other, not understand each other. And so when because I know you've been working on this novel for a while, and it's been a labor of love. And I'm curious, because you teach craft, you study craft. I'm curious if there's something that this novel demanded of you that you felt like you maybe had to level up or do something different related to craft.
I'm laughing. Oh, Michelle. Yes, I had to learn about plotting and time. My concepts tend to be fairly poetic and
And mythic. They're mythic
they're
as well.
mythic, right? But even in a myth, you have to have things happen. So um, I had to nail down arcs, and I got so into narrative arcs. hero's journey style arcs that I created. Oh, I got so into this. Michelle, I created arcs for the objects in the book. I created arcs for the weather. I created, and so there are these, if you were looking at a graph, there would be all of these kind of rainbow shaped arcs and that are all kind of intersecting and vibrating against each other. And one of the elements that I created an arc for was caged birds that live in Rand's
Yes,
in Rand's
yes.
house, and he doesn't really care for, and he learns to accept them. He starts letting them loose, and I won't tell you what happens to them. But an arc for me, my favorite kind of journey involves the crafting of a reversal. So you can imagine that there's a certain kind of reversal of a caged bird situation. So I'm also just I'm a kind of a crazed metaphorist. So I had fun creating these layers of metaphor. And if you want a technique, a fun technique, I used a search feature, navigation pane in Word to find words, objects. And I just kept looking them up and seeing where they were at different elements of the story. Where is the field? What's happening in the field, for example? And then all I had to do was figure out timing. Did it happen on the Tuesday after the Monday, or did it happen a week later? And, who's telling the story? So I'm not very good at time in my own personal life. I rarely know what time it is. So there's a
I'm
lot
glad
of
you showed up for
charting.
this.
Yeah, I did, and on time too. So yeah, I have a lot of little tricks that I use, and in the novel, you have to have a lot of those tricks too, even if it's as mundane as starting a paragraph with on the next day or on Tuesday morning or later that afternoon. Even if you're switching characters, you can connect timelines that way. So I had to learn some pretty basic stuff that's very different from short story writing, but I think I use some of that. I love the crystalline in stories. I love the extended metaphors that you can just hint at in stories 2 or 3 times, maybe a color or a shape. And so I got to play that game because I am obsessed.
Well, I've heard people, I mean, I've read drafts of it and read the current what's been published, and I've been at your beautiful launch, and I've heard people talk about the book, and so all of that sort of obsessive work really created, people feel like the field is a character, the weather is a character, the weather becomes, very, very, is very important in this book, and we're never lost in the book. It's a beautifully poetic, layered book, but we're never lost as a reader. So all of that structuring and make, I love the idea of making the arcs and the vibrating of those arcs and how they work. And it just, like, I just feel like you gave yourself over to it, like, because each book is different in terms of how it works and how you craft it.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. So
Thank you.
so all of that, resonates in the book. What I have another writer question, but before I go to that, I just wondering if you want to say a few words about why creating community and sustaining literary communities have been important to you. I think that there are writers out there who that's a value, but you express it so much more deeply, and it's so much more part of many pieces, community engagement, social justice, and you really are committed. Like, when people go to visit you on your website, which you'll give a little bit later, there's resources for writers. There's you've been in conversation with writers. Like building community and sustaining has been important to you. So I'm wondering if you might say a few words about that.
I think most of us writers start out pretty lonely with it. We have this little secret. I'm going to write something, I'm going to write a poem, and I'm not going to show it to anybody. So that's certainly how I started out. But then I noticed that going to a workshop, or just a person saying, I liked that, was enough to keep me going. And I realized that all the books I had read about writers and what they're supposed to be doing, and all the aphorisms like keep your butt in the chair at all times and write the same time every day. And having tried lots of different things, I learned that, for one thing, it is lonely work and you need a community because it's hard. And if you decided you were going to be a pole vaulter, you wouldn't do it without a coach. Writing is hard. A lot of people do it, but to write intense, compelling fiction is very hard. It takes time, and it doesn't just spring to the page. It takes a lot of what people call dedication, perseverance. And so, like with anything, you need a team. Who would do yoga every day? Well, there are some freaks out there. If they didn't have a class at least once a week. Looking at you. But it just really, we imprint on what people around us are doing. And it's lonesome work. And there are many, many reasons to be in community. And I wanted to foster community because I didn't have it. And it's a delight to watch others be in community with each other and with me. So, for example, I started a coffee house for writers and for musicians. And, Pittsburgh is one of those places that you run into people and they remember everything. I was just talking with one of my coffee house musicians in yoga class this morning. So I coached writers in how to read their work. And I learned how to read my work by doing that. I'm sort of naturally pretty good at it, but I also made friends for life. That's just an example. I got to see the first reading of Nancy Peacock, a favorite writer in the South. I got to see the first performance of Tift Merritt, a Grammy Award-winning musician, because I got to witness that. It's part of me forever. And that's a writer's tip that is really worth checking out. I think you asked this question at the launch, what's your best writer's tip? And mine is be generous. So, and that's a corollary to create a community, if only because you're going to want some people very, very close to you to celebrate with when you publish your book.
I love that. And I remember sitting, this had to be in 2011, or maybe 2011, in your much beloved strategies for the writing life workshop. And you said something like, when you're starting out, it sort of feels like all the writers know each other, and you don't feel like you're a real writer, and you kind of have to invest in other people. You got to, go to their readings, you read their work, reach out to them. And you were like, there really is no secret except that. And I think a lot of us were like, really? Like, and, the idea when you're just beginning, you don't feel like maybe worthy that you should know other writers, like, published writers or working writers, however in your mind you're defining that. But you you said, like, that is the way people are going to learn to read your work. You're going to find out how the business works. You're going to be inspired by other people.
Mm.
So I remember you talking about that,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
how important that is.
yeah. I do remember there was a complaint
Yeah,
from
yeah.
somebody in the group. Like all the famous writers hang out with each other, and I thought about that, and I said, you know what? They hung out with each other when they were just getting started, and it was hard, and that bonded them for life.
Mm.
So if you're just getting started, create those bonds because it is hard and you need them. And when you're, famous and accomplished, you'll have those bonds that go back. They're not false bonds of admiration, undue admiration. They're bonds of struggle. So that's the community we need.
So good, so good. So as we begin to close out, I would love to hear you talk a little bit about the submission, if you have a submission story about this novel. Right now, that's one of the things that I'm really interested in talking to writers about, because we don't really talk that much about the navigating the fear and challenges around submitting our work and submitting consistently and being more visible as a writer. And so I'm wondering if this novel had a submission story, so to speak.
Yes, it has its own long, long tail. Um, so I had a draft that I thought was pretty finished, but too long around the year 2000. And but I didn't start submitting it for quite some time. And then when I started submitting, I'd been at this writing community thing for such a long time that I had lots of friends with agents. And I asked for their recommendation and I submitted to their agents. And I get positive responses, but I never really quite got there. And yeah, as I was struggling to really try to perfect what I meant to do, to really nail what I meant to do, there were changes in the industry. So that was a really interesting journey for me. Uh, Agents who I had thought of as possibly friendly to me were just not even bothering to reject novels. And there was a lot of kind of discouraging things happening in New York. And then just about the time I really was ready to put it out there, I had some great contacts with agents, and they they wrote me panicked rejections, personal rejections. It was very nice of them to be personal. Um, uh, Along the lines of, it's too long,
Mhm.
and the length rules had changed, and also along the lines of, you're talking about racism, and we're having a lot of things shut down when people talk about racism and they're white. So there was identity politics going on, um, and it's a phenomenon I'm really interested in, and I really am interested in supporting Black and outsider writers. I certainly am an outsider writer, but eventually the letters got to be really panicky because they had just consolidated, and I just had to use my empathy skills to
Mm.
understand that the agents were having hard time selling books from their current clients,
Mm.
because when you have business consolidation, which they just have this huge consolidation, um, you lose staff, you lose editors, you lose contacts, and I just realized, I've shied away from using New York publishers and New York agents in my previous books because I've been so accepted by small publishers. Maybe that's the way to go. So I assembled my list. I sent to a small publisher. The first one I sent to was Regal House, and they called me and offered me a contract. And here's the story. I was so, I think what I said was, "Are you sure? Don't you think it's too long?" And anyway, Janie Royal was very kind. She said, "Oh no, it's not too long. I like it long. I like it the way it is." She's from New Zealand. It's bad information. But she's very definite in her opinion. And just between you and me, I kept revising and I tried to make it a little bit shorter. I had 18 months. But yeah, it was so accepting. And I think Regal is a brilliant small publisher. They offer some things that other small publishers don't. And one of the really key things they offer that you may or may not get with a New York publisher or agent is aggressive rights sales. They know that they're only going to make money if they try to sell additional rights, in addition to paperback rights and ebook rights. So I have they've successfully sold an audiobook, and I received a check for it. So I'm like, that's so surprising. And I know they're pitching to, they have really powerful agents that they have relationships, and they're pitching to Hollywood, fingers crossed. And
you heard it here first, people.
Right. Yeah. It's so fun to think about. I've got the cast all figured out. And they're pitching to they have top agents pitching to European rights and Asian rights, including China, which is very interesting. There's some really interesting things happening with the China market. So I'm feeling lucky.
Yeah. I think your story, that submission story, speaks to, things that I really encourage writers to think about, perseverance, not getting discouraged, breaking things down, trying, reaching out to people. It takes time to place work and to find the editor who loves it. You only need one.
Yeah.
And a good contract, like you only need one. And Regal House, loves the work. They put out this beautiful, let me just show everyone again, beautiful book, and they are really behind it. And it's a beautiful book, Marjorie. And I'm just so excited for how it's going out into the world. I'm wondering if you would just tell us where people can find you as they want to know more about you.
Yeah, so I have a webpage, www.marjoriehudson.com. Lots there about how to find me and my background and all my books and so on. There's a great book trailer that makes me just fall in love with my book all over again. And then I just started a Facebook author page. So it's Marjorie Hudson, author. And hilariously, I'm posting exercise videos for Book Tour Fitness.
I think I saw one of those. I was like, this is awesome.
See me doing jumping jacks and various breathing exercises. I hope to keep that up. Because boy, you've got to stay strong to do this. Oof. And then I have a YouTube site, and that has an increasing number of videos at Marjorie Hudson, at Marge, MARJ 1953. So that's what my handle.
That's wonderful. And I will make sure that those links and a link to the book and all that good stuff is going to be accessible probably right below where the video is. Thank you so much, Marjorie, and just wishing you so much love and so much amazingness yet to come with this book.
Thank you.